And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
I'm sorry. It's very, excuse me, very difficult to look at these images, Jake.
انت موقف استنى شوي زي انت موقف في اتهام في نشر كلمات مديح تعاطف وتشجيع عمل ارهابي. لا دعم استنى شوي دعم تعريض حيازه الاعلانات عرض العنف والارهاب والكشف عن الانتماء الى منظمه ارهابيه.
But don't think that decision to recognize Israel is an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine. The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs. But when you go into a thing of that kind, the people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you. Both of them were against me on the situation, but as President of the United States, I paid no attention to them, carried out what I thought was right, and I had the support of the Congress, and I could do it, which is unusual in these days.
Can you tell us specifically that a lot of Jewish people were against you too?
Well, there were a lot of Jewish people against me because they wanted the whole of Palestine. As I say, they wanted to drive all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
There are occasions in wars when war crimes take on an historic dimension. Such was the An-Nasser premature baby story that broke in all its ugliness today. The parents were sitting by the incubator with their premature babies and were forced out of the hospital on pain of being shot, as were then the staff. And the premature babies were left, 5 of them, to starve to death in a premature baby incubator. Starve to death. Their bodies, decomposed, have now been found. Now that people can re-enter the hospital. 5 babies, decomposed, murdered in cold blood by grown men, like the grown men that murdered Adam in the West Bank today. I want to ask you, what kind of man did that? What kind of man left those 5 babies to starve to death alone in their incubators? And what kind of a man turns his face away from that fact? What kind of a man or woman in power in any Western country cannot find a single word of condemnation of that crime? This is Lidici. This is the Warsaw Ghetto. This is a Holocaust. This is the murder, the slaughter of the innocents.
Regarding the Houthis, these attacks are reckless, dangerous, and they violate international law.
If Iran or its proxies widen this conflict and put more civilians at risk, you will hold them accountable. Act as if the security and stability of the entire region and beyond is on the line, because it is.
My warning to the Ayatollah was that if they continue to move against those troops, we will respond, and he should be prepared. It has nothing to do with Israel.
I was surprised that you didn't really put things in context before you gave your speeches. We have almost 30,000 Palestinians murdered by the Israeli regime, over 12,000 children. We have over 90% of the population are starving now. Babies have been born to malnourished mothers and they're only living for a few days. And you're saying that there's an unacceptable violation of international law going on and it's the Houthis doing it? Under international law, we have an obligation to prevent genocide taking place. The EU has done nothing to stop the genocide taking place. The Houthis have done something about it, and by interfering with shipping, facilitating the genocide.
Many Palestinian civilians have been killed. Do you agree with that?
Well, tell us how to do it differently. Yeah, what is too many people dying in World War II after Pearl Harbor? Did the American public worry about how many people were dying to destroy Tokyo and Berlin?
As a young boy, about the age of my 9-year-old son, carrying the dead body of his friend of the same age over his shoulder. The young boy lay dead across the shoulder of a 9-year-old boy carrying him. I don't know where. Certainly not to a hospital. There are no hospitals operating normally or even half normally, even 20% normally in the Gaza Strip now. Just carrying him because he was his friend. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. To what happened on October 7th inside Israel itself. It cannot possibly be that you can kill a completely unrelated young boy and all the other young boys and young girls and young babies and their mothers and their fathers, their grandfathers, their grandmothers. You're not allowed to do that. That collective punishment is illegal. Every single last bit of it.
If any group or any country is looking to widen this conflict and take advantage of this very unfortunate situation that we see, our advice is don't.
Overnight, the U.S. launching airstrikes in eastern Syria near the Iraqi border. F-16 fighters targeting 2 locations.
America strikes. The Biden administration carrying out a mass series of airstrikes in both Iraq and Syria. And I want to show you some new video that we have just gotten in of what's happening there on the ground. This is the aftermath of one of the strikes. The U.S. hit, we understand, 85 targets.
So again, right now, we are working very hard to prevent this from becoming a broader regional conflict.
New round of airstrikes by the U.S. and the United Kingdom in Yemen. They were also, the group of countries hit at least 30 Houthi targets across more than a dozen different locations. Unlike last night's strikes in Iraq and Syria, today's, the U.S. did not conduct alone.
That's right. This was once again conducted with the UK. This is the 3rd time the 2 nations have operated together to strike Houthi targets in Yemen.
The United States does not seek conflict with Iran. We do not want this war to widen.
So, Mr. President, hit Iran and hit them now and hit them hard.
Significant about tonight's U.S. strikes is that the targets went beyond these proxy groups. The targets included the Quds Force. That is the part of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that sponsors these groups, that the U.S. says provides weapons, intelligence, and training to these groups. And what's significant about that is it's the first time in the last 3 months we've seen these attacks that the U.S. have attacked Iranians. These are Iranians, Iranian weapons, Iranian sites. Yes, they are connected to the proxy groups, but they are not the Iraqis and the Syrians who are actually pushing the button. These are Iranians, and that is the first time that we've seen that.
This set of targets, 36 targets across 13 different locations in Yemen.
We maintain the right to defend ourselves.
Weeks, Iran's proxies have repeatedly attacked U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria, whose mission is to prevent ISIS from renewing its rampage.
Our forces that are there doing other important national security work like the Defeat ISIS mission.
ISIL is a direct outgrowth of al-Qaeda in Iraq, that grew out of our invasion, which is an example of unintended consequences.
I think what they're confronting here is the reality of a westward movement, Judge, of mujahideen, if you will, out of South Asia and out of the Persian Gulf through Iraq to the Levant, to Syria, to Lebanon, to Palestine. And that's what they created by getting rid of Saddam.
In fact, al-Qaeda showed up in Iraq only after the U.S. invaded the country, dismantled the Iraqi army and security forces, and created a security vacuum that allowed all sorts of foreign fighters and violent groups to enter. Al-Qaeda was able to recruit and grow into something even more menacing. The invasion of Iraq propelled the group from a small, isolated organization into a genuinely global network.
The Iraqi government is calling for the U.S. to withdraw its troops. Those calls seem to be in response to the U.S. launching airstrikes inside Iraq, targeting Iran-backed militants.
And so we're taking action to build an international coalition to address this threat. And I would remind you that this is not just a U.S. issue. This is an international problem, and it deserves an international response.
How in God's name, how can you just turn a blind eye to the truth of what's really happening? The Houthis have killed nobody with the interference of the ships. Israel has killed 30,000, and you're giving out about the Houthis who've killed nobody? You're putting shipping before the lives of Palestinians. You just don't give a damn about the Palestinian lives, and that's the truth of the matter. And you're worried about spillover in international law. Israel is bombing Lebanon, is bombing Syria, is bombing Gaza, and you're worried about the Yemenis interfering with ships because there's money been lost over it? Is there a joke? Honest, I just don't understand how you can take this perspective. What he's going to do about it? Are you ever going to tell Israel that they're committing a genocide? Because if this is not a genocide that's going on in Gaza, then what would you call it? That's one of my questions to you. I want you to know, what would you call what's going on in Gaza if it's not a genocide? And my other question to you is, if right now the US and UK are bombing cities in Yemen, do you think that's against the UN Charter? Because I do. Please tell me. It might be okay with the international rules-based order that just make up as you go along, but it is not okay with the UN Charter.
As President Erdogan said more than a decade ago to Shimon Peres's face on a platform, you're good at killing kids, aren't you? There's the latest one. The 62nd child murdered in the West Bank, not Gaza, nothing to do with Hamas, murdered in the West Bank since October 7th. Was Adam, such a holy name, the first human, the first man? But this was no man. Adam was shot dead by an Israeli sniper today, on camera. A little boy of 9. I have myself a little boy of 9. He was playing in the street. Obviously he was unarmed, and he was shot through the head by a grown man with a sniper's rifle in the uniform of the Israel Defense Force. How such a man can sleep tonight knowing that he murdered a child, like Herod, he murdered a child this very day for no reason, just because he could. So many images, so many episodes of this last 55 days will remain with all of us forever. Unfortunately, we will never be able to expunge them from our minds. This is a Guernica, every day and every night, except very, very much more deadly, very, very much more destructive.
We had several other people in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. You had to take it in small doses. You had to take it in small doses. Small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied. But it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done.
Empowering Sheikh Yassin and the Muslim Brotherhood, Israeli leaders thought they could divide and rule the occupied Palestinians, play them off against each other, secular nationalists against religious Islamists. Brigadier Yitzhak Segev, for example, who was the Israeli military governor in Gaza, and later told a New York Times reporter that he helped finance the Islamic movement. The Israeli government gave me a budget, he said. and the military government gives to the mosques. Cohen was the Israeli official who was responsible for religious affairs in Gaza for more than 2 decades, and who now says, quote, "Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation." The inconvenient truth is that Hamas is in part a creature of Israel's own making, an enemy that Israel spent more than 20 years helping to build up, and then spent the next 20 years, the past 20 years that is, trying to bomb, besiege, and blockade out of existence.
What are the chances of a Gaza ceasefire?
We need to see a cease. We need to see a humanitarian pause so we can flow. We need to see ceasing of the levels of violence that we're seeing. We need to see civilians protected. We need to see a humanitarian pause to get aid in, to get Canadians out, to get vulnerable people out, to get hostages released. These are the things that the people around the world are looking for.
People who are calling for a ceasefire now do not understand Hamas. That is not possible. It would be such a gift to Hamas because they would spend whatever time there was a ceasefire in effect rebuilding their armaments, creating stronger positions to be able to fend off an eventual assault by the Israelis. So we're in a very different world. I don't think it had to be the world we're in, but that's where we are, and we've got to figure out.
All those children, all those women, all those men that we saw destroyed, their lives extinguished on a lie. The lie that this began on October the 7th. The lie that this is a war against Hamas when 2,000-pound bombs are being dropped on hospitals and refugee camps.
Sagen Sie nicht ab sofort. Und warum sagen Sie nicht ab sofort Waffenstillstand, wenn Sie diesen Leid selbst gesehen haben?
Weil dieses Leid zu lindern, möglichst dafür zu sorgen, dass insbesondere jetzt in Gaza die Menschen mit dem Nötigsten versorgt werden können, mit Wasser, mit Lebensmitteln, dann hilft es eben nicht einfach aus dem Impuls heraus, die Waffen müssen schweigen zu sagen, weil das ist nicht Aufgabe von Politik.
Tonight, the Israeli military publishing video of what it says is an operational tunnel inside the Al-Shifa hospital complex. The IDF has been operating around the complex for days, closing in on what they long asserted was a hub of Hamas activity. It's not just the credibility of the IDF and Israel that's at stake. President Joe Biden said he feels absolutely confident that Hamas is there as the U.S. throws its weight behind Israel.
The first war crime is being committed by Hamas by having their headquarters, their military, hidden under a hospital.
It was built by Israeli engineers. Did you misspeak?
No, decades ago we were running the place. So we held them. It was decades, many decades ago, probably 4 decades ago, that we helped them to build these bunkers in order to enable more space for the operation of the hospital within the very limited size of this compound.
Okay.
There are many examples. The Al-Shifa hospital, which didn't in the end have tunnels or a command and control center under it, the media simply moved on, having repeated that lie as a justification for the invasion of a hospital in breach of all international law, all laws of war, all of the judgments of the Nuremberg Tribunal. The media endlessly repeated a lie, which when it turned out to be a lie, they simply forgot, or rather hoped that we would forget.
If you want to solve the problem, then you have to take in the whole truth. And you then have to admit nobody's hands are clean, that all of us are complicit to some degree. I look at this and I think back, what could I have done during my presidency to move this forward as hard as I tried? I've got the scars to prove it. But there's a part of me that's still saying, well, was there something else I could have done? That's the conversation we should be having. Not just looking backwards, but looking forward.
Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat.
They have failed to defeat. I'm not saying Hamas beat them. But as you know, a guerrilla army wins if it does not lose. A conventional army loses if it does not win. The powers in the West are betting on the collaborators in the Arab world. Some are evil, some are merely gutless cowards. Everything is being bet on those gutless cowards never finding courage, never finding that they can take no more, that this far and no further. And I believe that's a very dangerous bet indeed.
Friday, the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly voted in support of a humanitarian truce, but Israel and the United States voted against the resolution. Massive demonstrations calling for a ceasefire in Gaza continued this weekend. Thousands of members of Jewish Voice for Peace New York City shut down the main terminal of Grand Central Station during rush hour. It's the largest sit-in protest the city has seen in over 2 decades. Never again for anyone. 400 people were arrested, including rabbis, famous actors, and elected officials.
And others, a lot of us Jews, but we are here to protest the genocide that is happening in our name. It has to stop. The Palestinians have been the victims of oppression for 75 years. I am older than the state of Israel.
You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased.